Hi, I'm Tamsin. My husband said my job was just ideas, not real work. So he made me quit, told me to stay home, watch his sister's kids, cook, smile. And I did. I smiled. I stayed silent. I played along. Until one day, I moved the money. Then I made one phone call. And when they came home from vacation, they found out that smile wasn't kindness. It was a warning. Ever wonder what happens when a quiet woman stops being quiet? Before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from right now? What time is it? Drop it in the comments below, because this story might just remind you of someone you know. The morning light in Dallas has a way of making everything look calmer than it really is. The sun slides through the kitchen blinds, soft gold streaks across the countertop. I was standing there, holding my travel mug, when Corbett set down a cup of coffee in front of me. The ceramic one, not the one I take to work. "You don't have to rush anymore," he said, stirring sugar into his own mug like a man who's pleased with himself. "It's not like that job pays much anyway." He didn't look up. He never does when he drops his little darts like that. It's the kind of comment that sounds harmless if someone else hears it, a joke between husband and wife. But I felt it dig in deep. Cheap. That word just stayed there, echoing. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because silence keeps the peace. I picked up the mug and took a sip. The coffee was too bitter. I packed my laptop like I always did, careful, neat, controlled. Corbett leaned against the counter, still talking about the future, which in his mind meant his future. "Zadie's been stressed out. She and Ken need a break. Maybe you could help out with the kids while they're gone. You've always been good with them." "Help out?" I asked quietly. He nodded, like he was offering me a prize. "You could quit work for a little while, just until they get back. It's family, Tam. Zadie's exhausted. You'll understand." The way he said, "You'll understand," that tone men use when they've already decided for you. It made my stomach turn. I looked down at the floor, noticed a crumb near the fridge, something small and out of place, and thought, that's me, the crumb. I told him I'd think about it, though we both knew what that meant. He kissed my forehead on his way out, like he'd just done something noble. The door closed, and I stood there, still holding the mug. The day stretched on like a slow exhale. Around noon, the phone rang. Zadie's voice was bright and sweet, almost too polished. "Tam, oh my God, you're a lifesaver. I knew you'd say yes. You're the best." I could hear music in the background. She was already packing for her trip, laughing with one of her kids. "You don't mind, right? I mean, it's just a week. You'll have fun with them. They adore you." I pressed my fingers to the counter to steady myself. "Of course," I said. My voice sounded like someone else's. When I hung up, I stood still for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. I imagined my coworkers at lunch, my desk waiting for me, my email filling up with questions that would now go unanswered. That night, Corbett came home early. He was in a good mood, always is when he gets his way. "Did you call your manager yet?" he asked, hanging his jacket. I turned off the stove. "Not yet." "Well," he said, "no time like the present." I picked up my phone. My hands felt cold. I walked into the living room, where the light was soft and fading, the kind of light that makes everything look gentler than it is. He stood behind me, not touching me, just close enough to make sure I did it. My manager sounded surprised. "You sure, Tam? You just earned the client bonus. Are you sick or—" "I'm fine," I said. I could see Corbett's reflection in the TV screen. Arms crossed, waiting. I smiled. "I just think it's time." And I hung up. For a second, there was silence. Corbett exhaled like the hero in a movie who just saved the day. He walked off to take a shower, humming under his breath. I sat on the couch, phone still in my hand. Outside, the sun had nearly disappeared, and the streetlights were flickering on one by one. The mug sat on the table, half empty now, a ring of dark stains circling the inside. It looked like an eclipse. I remember thinking, that smile I gave him wasn't surrender. It was something else, the beginning of something he'd never see coming. He thought my silence meant surrender. He never asked what it really meant. The next morning came earlier than I wanted it to. I hadn't slept much, just drifted in and out while staring at the ceiling, listening to the occasional creak of the old ducks kicking on. Corbett was already gone when I got up, probably to the gym, pretending like everything in his world wasn't held up by the woman he'd just asked to vanish into housework. By 8:05, Zadie's SUV rolled up the driveway like it owned the place. The tires didn't even stop squealing before the doors flew open. 3 kids tumbled out, Odette with a tangled braid and a frown, Bram already poking Senna with a foam sword, and Senna whining about not finding her iPad charger. Zadie didn't get out at first. She was still putting on lipstick in the rearview mirror. When she finally stepped out, she gave me a half hug, more of a shoulder tap, and shoved a grocery bag into my arms. It rattled with half-empty cereal boxes, pre-cut grapes, and sticky snack packs. "There's a list of routines in the front pocket," she said, tapping the bag like it was a gift. "Nothing major, just naps, meds, screen limits, meal times, bedtime prayers, and oh, Senna can't have red dye." She laughed then, real short. "You're basically part of the team now, Tam." I opened my mouth, but she didn't wait. She turned back to her car and muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "Free labor's still labor." The door slammed. She didn't wave, just drove off like this was always the plan. The kids stormed in behind me, loud and sticky, already pulling cushions off the couch and dropping their backpacks in the hallway. I set the bag down on the kitchen table and stared at the coffee mug beside it, the same one Corbett handed me the day before. It trembled a little as I picked it up, or maybe my hand did. Same result either way. That whole morning felt like I was stuck inside someone else's body. I wiped counters that were just wiped. Cut sandwiches into triangles, not squares, because Senna said squares were for babies. Bram spilled apple juice and stared at me like it was my fault the glass was slippery. Odette rolled her eyes every time I spoke. By noon, I had forgotten what silence felt like. When Corbett came home that evening, I thought for a second he might actually say something helpful. He walked in, sniffed the air, and frowned. "No dinner yet?" he asked, loosening his tie like he'd just stepped off a battlefield. I looked at the mess in the sink, the half-prepped chicken on the counter, and the pile of laundry still warm from the dryer. "You've been home all day, Tam? You're tired? From what?" It was like someone dropped a rock in my chest. I didn't answer. If I had, I don't think I would have stopped. I served dinner. He didn't say thank you. That night, after the kids finally went down and the dishes were drying in the rack, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The hum of the fridge was the only thing keeping me grounded. Phone buzzed, lighting up with a message. "Bryony, heard you quit?" HR was shocked. "You sure you're okay?" I stared at it for a full minute before typing, "Just helping family." Then I backspaced all of it. My fingers hovered. Instead, I typed, "I'm fine." I hit send. The reflection of my face stared back at me in the black screen. Pale, tired, older than yesterday. I closed my eyes for a beat, then got up and went to the hallway drawer. Tucked beneath some old receipts and batteries was my old work laptop. I hadn't told Corbett I kept it. He thought I'd returned it with everything else. But I knew the IT guy. He owed me a favor. I powered it on, and the screen blinked awake like an old friend. I opened the resignation email I'd been pressured to write. The subject line still stung. "Thank you for the opportunity." My eyes scanned every word. Formal, polite, dead inside. Then something in the inbox caught my eye. A message from HR dated the day after I sent the resignation. I clicked it. Subject, RE, Employee Status Confirmation. Tam Sinclair Body. Hi Corbett, thanks for confirming Tam's decision. We'll proceed with closing out her files. My breath caught. He called them? He confirmed for me? My jaw tightened. I sat there for a long time, then reached for a notebook I kept next to the old recipe books. I flipped to a blank page and wrote the date. Then I began. Hours watched, 11 meals cooked, 3 load of laundry, 2 calls. Zadie didn't answer, 2. Things said to me that weren't thank you, 12. It wasn't much, but it was something. A trail, a record, a reminder I was still here, still thinking, still writing. The house around me was dim, quiet again. Not peaceful, just paused. I looked at the cracked coffee mug on the table. It had a fine line running down the side now, like it might split in two if you weren't careful. They thought they'd erased me from the office. They never realized I was still writing, just in a different place. It was still early when I heard the front door chime, that soft mechanical ding that somehow always felt louder when the house was quiet. I didn't have to check. Only one person rings the doorbell and then walks right in. Renata. She was already halfway into the living room by the time I turned the corner, purse tucked neatly under her arm, eyes sweeping the room like a realtor doing an appraisal. She wore perfume that could choke a room and a cardigan with pearl buttons, not a hair out of place. I thought I'd stop by, she said, setting down a small bouquet of flowers she'd brought, carnations and something green that looked like parsley. You finally have time to do something meaningful now, don't you? She smiled at me, the kind that curls but doesn't warm. I gave her a nod and folded the last towel in the basket, pretending like her words hadn't landed. Family always comes first, she added. Zadie told me how much you're helping. You're such a giver. I didn't look up. She walked into the kitchen without asking and started rearranging the flowers I already had in the vase. Zadie always keeps hers fresh. A woman's home should feel intentional. Her tone was sweet, but it cut, the way honey sticks when you try to wash it off. I told her the kids were upstairs with a movie and that lunch was already done. She nodded like that was expected. Nothing was ever above expectations with Renata. You just started from there and worked backwards. When she finally left, she kissed my cheek like she was marking it. I wiped it off before the door even closed behind her. Back in the laundry room, I folded the last of the shirts and set them aside. But I wasn't really thinking about the clothes. I was thinking about her eyes, the way she looked at me like I'd become what I was always meant to be. Like quitting my job, losing myself, and running someone else's household was some beautiful, noble submission. And just like that, something small in me shifted. Not rage, not yet. Something quieter, sharper. Later that afternoon, Zadie called. I was stirring spaghetti sauce with one hand, balancing Bram's tablet in the other while he whined about the Wi-Fi. I had the phone on speaker. Her voice was bubbly. They're being angels, right? You're a natural mom, Tam. Who needs a job when you've got love? I paused. Yeah, who needs a job? The call ended. I stared at the red button on the screen for a long time. Then I pressed another button. Record. From now on, every word would be saved. Not because I wanted a fight, but because when someone finally asks what happened, I'd have more than silence. The kids ran through the hallway. I cleaned again. The day dragged toward evening like a thick blanket I couldn't shake off. Around 7:30, the doorbell rang again. I opened it to find Hollis, our neighbor across the street, holding a pie. I saw your porch light on, he said. Figured you might want some company. Or sugar. I smiled, real this time. I used to see you drive to work every morning, he said, handing me the pie. You okay, kid? Just taking a break, I told him, trying not to sound too tired. Hollis looked at me for a long second. Breaks don't last this long. He tapped the pie tin once, then turned to go. That 5-minute visit stayed with me longer than it should have. Maybe because he noticed, maybe because he didn't ask anything more. I sat on the porch for a while after that. The kids were finally down. The house hummed with the quiet of things left unsaid. I went to the bedroom, opened the drawer, pulled out the notebook again. It used to just be a place I scribbled thoughts, worries. Today, it became something else. I flipped to a new page, wrote, "Renata dropped by," compared me to Zadie, said I finally had time to be meaningful, didn't ask how I was, didn't offer to help, I dated it, time stamped it. Then, after a pause, I added, maybe they're right, maybe I'm overreacting, but maybe they're just scared of what I'll do when I stop listening. I shut the book and slipped it back in the drawer. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just my story anymore. It was evidence. They thought my quiet meant defeat. But quiet people don't disappear. They document. Morning came with the sound of plates clinking and the faint hum of the coffee maker. I'd gotten up before the sun, habit, maybe, or survival. The kitchen smelled like toast and routine. I was slicing fruit when I heard the scrape of a chair behind me. Corbett sat down, flipping through his phone. "You're up early," he said, not looking at me. "Guess all that free time's making you productive." He reached across the counter, grabbing my notebook before I could move it. It had been sitting near the fruit bowl, half open. "What's this?" he asked, already flipping through the pages. His smirk came before his laugh, that low, condescending kind of laugh men give when they think they've caught you doing something foolish. "Are you journaling again? You and your little feelings?" He tossed it back on the counter like it was a napkin. I didn't move, didn't even flinch. I wiped my hands on the towel, closed the notebook carefully, and said, "Some feelings age better in ink than in memory." He laughed again. "God, you're dramatic." He stood up, stretched, kissed my cheek like everything was normal, and walked away. What he didn't notice was my phone sitting next to the fruit bowl, screen black, microphone on. It caught every word, including that laugh. When the door closed behind him, I exhaled. Not relief, more like confirmation. By afternoon, the kids were playing outside, chasing each other with sticks they called magic wands. The house was finally quiet. I opened the drawer, took out my old laptop, and pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life, still logged into my old company account. I hadn't planned to check it. Maybe I just missed that world, the one where people respected me enough to send meeting invites. Then I saw it. Subject, exit paperwork incomplete, awaiting signature. From HR Department. I blinked, then read it again. The email was dated 2 weeks after my resignation. My paperwork was never finalized. My employment file was still open. Corbett's call to confirm my resignation hadn't gone through legally. My heart kicked once, hard. I opened a blank email and typed from a new address I'd made months ago, under a different name. Compliance inquiry, potential spousal interference case, request for clarification. The words came naturally, like muscle memory. I used corporate phrasing, neutral, professional, airtight, no emotion, just law. I hovered over send, then clicked. For the first time in months, I didn't feel powerless. I felt awake. That night, Corbett came home early, dressed nice, carrying a bottle of wine. "Dinner tonight," he said. "Mom's coming, and Zadie. I thought we'd thank you properly for everything you've done." The phrase "thank you properly" had teeth. I cooked anyway. Chicken, rosemary, roasted potatoes. The kind of meal that fills a house with warmth, even when there isn't any. Renata arrived first, with flowers again. "You've been glowing lately," she said, brushing imaginary dust off the counter. "I can tell this new lifestyle suits you. Zadie was right. You're happier now. Zadie walked in behind her, holding a gift bag, smirking. That's what happens when you stop pretending to be something you're not. I looked at her for a long second, then smiled. We sat down at the table. Corbett poured wine, made a toast about family teamwork. Everyone laughed. I carved the chicken. They talked about vacation plans, about how Zadie deserved her break. I poured water into glasses one by one. When I reached Renata, I said quietly, "Enjoy it. It's the last meal I'll cook for free." The room froze. Renata blinked. Zadie stopped mid-laugh. Corbett's fork hung in the air. "What did you say?" he asked, voice low. I smiled, polite as ever. "Just that I'm done giving away things that cost me time. Dinner included." I sat down, folded my napkin, and took a bite. No one spoke for a while after that. The only sound was the clock ticking above the doorway. Inside, though, I could feel it. Something shifting. The first crack in their control. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Because that's what they never understood. Silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes it's the sound of strategy. They mistook my calm for weakness. That's why the next storm will catch them smiling. It didn't take long. By the next morning, the storm I'd expected came. Just not from where I thought. I was rinsing dishes in the same sink I'd stared into 100 mornings before, when my phone rang. It was Zadie. I let it ring once, twice. On the third, I picked up and hit speaker. Her voice exploded through the phone like broken glass. "Tam, what the hell did you do? My card's frozen. The joint account won't let me transfer anything. Did you touch something?" I dried my hands slowly, keeping my voice calm. "I just organized things a little, consolidated some access. Didn't you say I should help the family?" There was a pause, brief, sharp, electric. Then came the muttering, the breathless stammering. "You can't just touch. That's not. Corbett didn't say." She cursed under her breath, followed by a choked-off sound of frustration and disbelief. "I even named the account," I said, wiping the counter. "Family priorities. Thought it was fitting." She hung up without saying goodbye. I stood still for a moment, listening to the silence that followed her exit. The kind that only happens after a mask falls off and hits the floor. The app had taken me a weekend to set up. All household funds, including the accounts I was still legally attached to, had been rerouted through a budget tracker. On paper, a way to help manage the family's finances. In reality, it was a lockbox. My earnings were isolated. I'd separated every transaction with precise notes and legal timestamps. Corbett didn't come home until mid-afternoon. He slammed the door harder than usual and dropped his keys on the counter like a dare. "You moved money?" he barked. "From our account?" "Our account," I echoed. "You mean the one where you used my name to take out bills while telling me to quit my job?" His jaw tightened. "That's not how it works. You can't just make changes." I looked at him without blinking. "You made sure my name stayed on everything. Remember? That's what you said when I signed over the lease, the car, the cards. For simplicity." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He had no words. I turned and walked toward the laundry room without another glance. That silence? It belonged to me now. Evening settled like dust. The kids were upstairs, their feet thumping across the ceiling as they played. I carried a basket of folded towels through the hallway when I heard voices in the living room. I paused just out of sight. Renata's voice, all cool, controlled poison. "You need to get her back under control. She's embarrassing you." Corbett sighed. "I'll handle it." I stepped forward, cracked coffee mug in hand. It still had the chip from the day Zadie dropped off her kids. A perfect imperfection. "You don't handle me anymore." They both looked up, startled. Renata forced a smile. "We're family, dear." I stared at her, unblinking. That word means something different where I come from. I walked upstairs, each step deliberate. Later that night, after the house had gone still, I sat at the kitchen table, laptop glowing in the dark. I refreshed my inbox. A new email blinked in bold. Subject: RE, Compliance Inquiry, Spousal Interference. From Corporate HR, Confidential. We're investigating the claim. Spousal interference is a violation under company policy. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. Please let us know if you wish to file a reinstatement request. We are here to support you. I reread the message 3 times, then leaned back in my chair and watched my reflection in the screen. The same woman Corbett once called fragile, the same woman Renata pitied, the same woman Zadie underestimated. But I wasn't her anymore. They built their comfort on my silence. They never realized I was using that silence to build my case. By late Saturday afternoon, I'd ironed the napkins, polished the wine glasses, and set the table with a precision that felt surgical. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, I'd stopped caring about that months ago, but because I didn't want to leave them a single excuse. When they lost control tonight, I wanted it to be clear who was really out of line. The roast had been in the oven since 4, filling the house with that slow-cooked scent of comfort and false security. The kids were at a neighbor's for a sleepover, and the house, for once, was quiet. Renata was the first to arrive. Of course she was. She never liked being second to anyone, not even a dinner invitation. She stepped through the front door with her usual air of judgment tucked neatly into her smile, holding a bouquet of carnations like they were her olive branch. I thought these might brighten the place, she said, scanning the living room like a realtor assessing a fixer-upper. Zadie's house always smells like lemon polish. You should try it. I smiled and took the flowers. Thanks, I'll add them to the centerpiece. They clash, she muttered, walking past me like I hadn't said a thing. Zadie arrived not long after, chattering on speakerphone as she walked in, heels clacking on the hardwood. Her tone was loud, careless, something about a friend's divorce and a new Pilates studio that charged extra for emotional realignment. She barely acknowledged me. "Hey, Tam," she said, not bothering to look. "You made roast? Classic. You know Mom used to burn hers every Thanksgiving?" Renata chuckled behind her. "That was before she discovered timers, dear." I took a deep breath and adjusted the silverware again. It wasn't crooked. I just needed something to do with my hands. Then Corbett arrived, stepping into the dining room like a politician at a fundraiser. Crisp shirt, fresh shave, wine glass in hand. His eyes scanned the table, and he gave me that performative smile I used to fall for when we were still pretending. "Everyone," he began, raising his glass. "Let's toast to my wife, the woman who almost cost us everything." There was a pause. Then the kind of laughter that doesn't come from humor but from discomfort. Nervous, polite, pitiful. Renata leaned in with a whisper meant to carry. "She's learning to stay in her lane." I didn't flinch. My hands rested in my lap, fingers gently intertwined. I looked down at my plate, then lifted my gaze slowly, not at them, but to the far end of the table. Leora sat near the window, quiet, composed. I'd invited her days ago under the guise of needing help with a charity project. She hadn't asked too many questions, just smiled, accepted, and shown up. Tonight, she wasn't there for food. She was there to witness. Dinner moved on. Corbett turned every conversation into a stage. He talked about Zadie's family-first mindset and how some people didn't understand what real commitment looked like. She thought selling ideas online was real work, he said, chuckling into his wine. Bless her heart. Laughter again, sharper this time. I tilted my head. "You're right," I said gently, keeping my eyes on the rim of my glass. "Ideas can't buy class. but they can build proof. Zadie looked up, her brows pinched, trying to find the insult in my tone. Leora caught my eye, her face unreadable, but her nod was enough. By the time dessert came out, a lemon tart I'd made with exacting care, Corbett was well into his third glass of wine. The lines between jokes and jabs were starting to blur. "You should thank me, Tam," he said, his voice a notch louder. "You've never had it this easy. Look around. You're lucky." I reached under the table and slid a small envelope from my purse. With quiet precision, I placed it next to his plate. "You're right again," I said. "That's why I wanted you to see something." He looked down, confused, opened the flap, pulled out the printout. His eyes scanned the header first, then the subject line in bold, "Spusal interference." Active investigation. His hand tightened around the paper. The grin vanished. His wine glass wobbled slightly in his other hand. Renata set her fork down. Zadie blinked twice and leaned forward. The room, once filled with the hum of silverware and smugness, turned still. Corbett looked up, barely able to form the words. You reported me?" I held his gaze, calm, unshaken. "No, I just stopped pretending I didn't exist." Then I stood, collected my plate, smoothed the cloth napkin. "Enjoy dessert," I said, glancing around the table. "I already had mine." I turned and walked away. The hallway never felt longer or lighter. Behind me, no one spoke, no one moved, not even Zadie. In the reflection of the hallway mirror, I caught a glimpse of myself. Back straight, shoulders square. They thought silence protected them. They forgot silence remembers everything. The sound of the front door closing behind the last guest felt like an exhale I'd been holding all night. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the polite lies, all gone. The air was thick with leftover perfume and something sourer. The aftertaste of humiliation, theirs and mine, both. I stacked the plates mechanically, the way you do when your hands need something to do while your mind is elsewhere. The roast pan sat cold on the stove, untouched since dessert. I was rinsing the serving spoons when I heard the click of heels behind me. Renata. She closed the kitchen door slowly, like she was sealing off a crime scene. When she spoke, her voice was low and even, the kind of calm that comes before something sharp. "You think you've won tonight?" she said, setting her purse on the counter. "You have no idea what family can do when it feels cornered." I didn't turn around. I just kept drying the same glass until it squeaked. "That sounds like a threat," I said softly. "It's a warning," she replied. "You'll apologize to my son tomorrow. You'll take back whatever nonsense you stirred up with HR, and we'll pretend this never happened. That's what decent women do. They fix things quietly." I finally turned, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. "You raised him well," I said. "He learned manipulation from the best." Her expression cracked, just a fraction, but I saw it. The muscle in her jaw twitched. It was the first time anyone had said it out loud to her face. "Don't mistake your spite for strength, Tamsin. You wouldn't have a roof over your head without him." I took a step forward, close enough to smell her perfume, lavender and power. "No," I said evenly. "You made sure I stayed under it." Her eyes narrowed. "You know why I told Corbett to keep you home?" So there it was, the admission. The truth that had been sitting like fog between us for years. She straightened her posture, her tone colder now. "He was ashamed, Tamsin. You with your little marketing job chasing numbers and clients. It embarrassed him, and frankly, it embarrassed me. Our family has standards. I told him he needed a wife who stayed present, not one who hid behind a desk." I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just let the words hang there between us like wet laundry. "Marriage isn't about fairness," she continued. "It's about balance. Men lead, women secure. You should have known that by now." I tilted my head. Balance isn't balance when one person's invisible. She scoffed, stepping closer. You'll regret this rebellion. The world's not kind to women who forget their place. I didn't move away. Maybe, I said quietly, but at least it'll be mine to regret. For a long moment, we just stood there. Two women separated by decades but trapped in the same system, one guarding it, the other breaking out. And then I saw it. A flicker. Not anger this time, but fear. The kind that comes when someone realizes the cage they built no longer locks. Renata grabbed her purse and turned toward the door. "You don't know what you're doing," she said. "Actually," I whispered, "I think I finally do." She left without another word. The door shut, heavy and final. For a moment, the only sound was the refrigerator humming, steady and indifferent. I exhaled, a long, quiet breath that felt like shedding old skin. Then, from the hallway, came the faintest sound, a soft tap, like someone shifting their weight on hardwood. I turned and saw a shadow by the doorframe. Leora. She stepped forward slowly, phone in hand. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop," she said, "but I heard everything." My heart skipped. "Everything?" She nodded. "Her saying she told him to keep you home. The threats. All of it. I hit record halfway through." I swallowed hard. You recorded it?" Leora nodded again. "You don't have to use it, but you should have it." For the first time that night, I felt something deeper than relief, something like safety. Not because I had power over them, but because I had proof I wasn't crazy. When she left a few minutes later, I stood alone in the kitchen. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of echoes, of evidence, of everything they thought would fade. I walked to the cabinet and took down my cracked coffee mug. I filled it halfway, placed it next to the notebook, and stared at both, the wound and the weapon. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows. Inside, the clock ticked past midnight. "Tomorrow," I murmured, tracing the rim of the cup. "I stop surviving. I start living." I didn't need to raise my voice. The silence carried it for me. By morning, the house felt different, not quieter, just heavier, like it was holding its breath, waiting. I was sitting at the edge of the bed, folding the last of my sweaters into a small box. Not a suitcase, not yet, just a box, simple, brown, taped at the bottom. I wanted to move slowly, with intention. Let them see it happen, one crease, one corner at a time. Corbett's phone rang in the hallway. His footsteps paused outside the bedroom door. "HR department," he muttered under his breath and answered. "Hello?" I didn't need to hear both sides. His voice told me enough. "Wait, this is all a misunderstanding." A pause, then sharper. "I don't know what she's told you, but—" Another pause, longer this time. He stepped into the doorway. His face was paler than I'd seen it in years. "They said they have recordings," he said, almost to himself. "They said I interfered with your career. Tam, what the hell is this?" I kept folding. It's what happens when people finally listen. He didn't argue. He just stood there, holding his phone like it had personally betrayed him. Downstairs, the front door slammed open. "Tamsin!" Renata's voice carried like a blade through the house. I didn't flinch, just picked up the box and made my way down the stairs. She was waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed, eyes ablaze. "What did you do?" she spat. "They're calling the family. They called the board. Your name is all over this." I set the box on the counter. "I didn't say anything new," I said, "only repeated what you did, word for word." Her face drained. I watched as the color fell out of her cheeks, as her mouth moved without sound. You recorded me?" she whispered. "No, but the hallway did." Corbett came in behind her, hand still gripping the phone. "You've destroyed this family," he snapped. No, I said, and turned to face him fully. You did that the day you confused love with control. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was electric, full of everything unsaid between us over the years. The dinners swallowed with fake smiles, the promotions I'd turned down, the favors I was expected to offer without thanks. It all sat there between us now, heavy and undeniable. He sat down hard in the kitchen chair, not angry, just small. I walked to the living room, pulled my keys from the bowl near the door, and opened the hall closet. The kids' drawings were still taped to the inside of the door. Sunbursts, stick figures with crooked arms, a heart that said, "Best mom ever" in crayon. I smiled at them, not for what they said, but for what they meant. Proof I was more than who he tried to make me. I took a deep breath and loaded the box into the car parked out front. The air was crisp. Fall had crept in overnight, quiet and sure. From the window, I saw the kids' faces peeking through the curtains. I gave them a small wave. Nothing. Dramatic. I didn't want them to fear the truth. I just wanted them to see it can be lived through. When I went back inside, Corbett was still frozen. Renata was pacing. "You're walking away?" she hissed. I looked her in the eyes. "I already walked away. Today I'm just locking the door behind me." And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I left a gift. The cracked coffee mug. The one he gave me with his smug little "you don't have to rush anymore" speech. I placed it on the counter, handle facing him, with a folded letter inside. Not from me, from his job. His hands shook as he pulled the letter out, reading the header in disbelief. Subject: Investigation of Domestic Interference. Employment Conduct Review. "I didn't even talk to them yet," he muttered. "No," I said, reaching for the doorknob. "They talked to you." He looked at me like I'd grown 2 heads. Like he couldn't decide whether to beg or blame. I didn't wait to find out which he'd choose. I stepped outside, the air cool against my skin, the sound of birds layered over the dull hum of suburbia waking up. I turned back once, not out of nostalgia, just to acknowledge the place where I finally stopped apologizing for existing. My smile wasn't for him. It wasn't for Renata. It wasn't even for me. It was for every woman who's ever had to choose between keeping the peace or keeping her soul. "They wanted me to stop working," I whispered to the breeze. "I finally did, just not for them." Then I got in the car and drove away. I drove for hours that morning. No destination, just distance. The silence in the car wasn't heavy. It was clean. No more background noise of someone else's expectations humming beneath my thoughts. For the first time in years, my mind wasn't bracing for impact. 3 months later, I was sitting by a wide window in a corner cafe in downtown Chicago. The kind of place with fresh bread smell in the air and real ceramic mugs that made you feel like you had time. Sunlight crept across the table, warm on the back of my hand as I typed. My laptop screen glowed with the outline of a proposal, a mentorship initiative for women rebuilding their lives after forced unemployment or domestic control. It had taken root in my mind the morning I drove away, and now it was blossoming into something real. A soft ding pulled me back to the moment. My phone lit up. Official settlement. Case closed. I opened the email. A short message from HR, finalizing everything. The words weren't triumphant. They were quiet, respectful, matter-of-fact, just like I needed them to be. I let out a long breath and sipped my coffee. From a new cup this time, white porcelain, wide rim, no cracks. It fit well in my hands. I didn't even hear the door open until I heard the voice. Black coffee, no sugar. The words floated in the air like a memory. My fingers paused on the keyboard, but I didn't turn. A moment later, he was standing beside my table. Corbett. His suit was still pressed, his shoes polished, but he looked different, smaller, not in body, just in presence. The kind of shrinking that comes from being seen without a script. "You look different," he said after a beat. "I am." I didn't invite him to sit, but he lingered. I could feel him waiting for something, maybe my anger, maybe permission to be forgiven. He got neither. "You really left, huh?" he said, like he still didn't believe it. I closed my laptop, not in a rush, just done. "No," I said quietly. "I just stopped staying." He nodded. A sad, stunted kind of nod. As if somewhere in his mind, the version of me that played along was still real. His eyes fell on the cup in my hands. "New mug?" "No cracks this time." He didn't say anything after that. Didn't ask about the kids. Didn't ask what I was doing now. And I didn't offer. That chapter was over, and I wasn't interested in footnotes. The cafe bustled around us. Cups clinking, steam hissing, chairs dragging across wood. The world hadn't stopped while I changed. It had simply waited for me to rejoin it. I stood, slipped my laptop into my bag, and left a few bills on the table. As I adjusted the strap on my shoulder, he reached out. Just a little. "Tamsin, I hope you're okay." I paused, met his eyes. "I am." Then I stepped around him and pushed the door open. Outside, the cold had a bite, but I welcomed it. The air was sharp, honest. It woke something in me that I hadn't felt in a long time. A sense of motion that was mine alone. I turned down the street, letting the crowd fold me into its rhythm. I wasn't walking away from something anymore. I was walking toward myself. They used to mock what I did, how I worked, how I loved. They called my work cheap, I thought. They never understood. It was my worth that was priceless. A quiet smile touched my lips, soft and real. The kind that comes not from winning, but from being whole. And that smile, the one they feared, was never about them. It was for me.